Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard and this is Lap of the World. Normally, you're home for road trips and racetracks, except that we're currently under quarantine, so here we are in the garage near no one, answering a question that I've gotten pretty frequently over the past year or so. That's probably because it was in about this time last year that I drank the Auto Tempest Kool-Aid and went and found on Craigslist in Oklahoma a 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo. I subsequently bought that car, which is, to my knowledge, the cheapest Gated Gallardo coupe with a clean title, mind you, ever to have changed hands, at least certainly since I've been keeping records, which goes back probably 6 years at this point. Now the question I've gotten is, how does the Lamborghini compare to the NSX? You know, the car that I've done most of my driving on this channel in, and that's a question that I've been loath to answer, and here's why. I just don't think that I right now, with only a year of ownership and probably 6 or 7 months of that I've actually been able to drive the Lamborghini, which is a story for a different video. I don't think I have the breadth or depth of experience with that car yet to really make a call of like, hey, you know, it does this better, it does this better. I mean, I can pick nits here and there, but as far as a really in-depth comparison, I'm not prepared to do that at this point. It's probably coming down the road and we'll get there. But what I want to talk about today, though, is something that I've been working on while social distancing. Some might consider it more dangerous than any track event, even though I didn't even leave my house to do it. And that is, I have added up all of the receipts for these cars for the Lamborghini that I've owned for 1 year and the NSX that I've owned for 11 years. Now, the question at hand is, starting with one of the cheapest NSXs ever to change hands with a clean title at $16,000 in 2008 versus the cheapest Gated Gallardo coupe that I could find with a clean title in 2019 for $75,000. Which one of these, with a year of ownership and 11 years of ownership, has actually cost me more money? Place bets now in the comments below. All right, so now that you've had a chance to think about that for a minute, let me throw a couple of caveats at you here just before we get started. First, with the NSX, I feel like this is probably a worst case scenario for one of these cars, a Gen 1 NSX, in that when I bought the car, it already had 211,000 miles on it. It was in what I would call a state of significant neglect. It ran and drove, that's about all I'll give it credit for. The electrical system was on its way out. The transmission was in the infamous snap ring range, which did come back to bite me, but just many years later. And there were some other factors there. Well, also the fact that I track the car all the time. You're going to have a little more wear and tear, as well as tire and brake consumable costs involved with that. The Gallardo, on the other hand, I feel like I've gotten off pretty easy with that one so far. Kind of generally more car experience when I bought it. I knew what I was getting into. It needed some work. The price was commensurate, I believe. And the work that I've had to do on it, I was able to do myself, and most of it was fairly minor. And I was also able to offset some of the maintenance costs by selling some of the aftermarket parts that came on the car and replacing those with sort of OEM plus options that saved a buck or two. So with that said, let's start with the Gallardo, since that's the lower hanging fruit in this case. Now, most of its cost of ownership for the past year has been the purchase price and registration. Purchase price, as I said, was $75,000, and to register it in Tennessee was an additional $5,437. So when you're shopping for an exotic car, make sure you budget for that, because it'll hit you. The next biggest line item on my list were the Apollo wheels that I bought for the car. Not so much a repair, but a modification to kind of de-pimp it a little bit. Those were $1,035 for the set. Now, those are normally about $1,000 a piece, so I will call that a win. But the rest of the items on this list are largely, I mean, there are a few that are a few $100s, but generally nominal costs there. But the total including everything so far, is $84,185.30. Don't tell my wife. However, if you remove the purchase price and the tax for registration from that, I've only actually spent $3,700 and some change dollars on the car. Now, some of that is, I've done some, if any of you have done Lemons racing, I've done some Lemons math there, in that I have tallied a negative where I've been able to sell some things. I sold some aftermarket parts, particularly exhaust components that came with the car, and was able to offset some of the mods that I then did or repairs that I then did. So that's just kind of a little bit of a budget hack there. But yeah, total $84,000 and a little bit. Now let's get to the big stack over here. Now the NSX, obviously, 2008 purchased for $16,000. We are starting at a much lower baseline. The question is, how much of these 3 pages are big enough ticket items to catch us up? So let's take a look at a few here. First, getting it registered was a paltry $1,272 in comparison. I had the first timing belt and water pump job, in which I also had all of the coolant hoses replaced. And that was a shop bill. I had that done at Ashland Motorsports, which I don't even know it exists anymore, but Barn Man on the forums. Barney did that for me. This is probably the friends and family rate of $2,747 for that whole service. Let's see here. The KW coilovers were just shy of $2,000. Having the head gaskets done, the timing belt done again, the lost motion assemblies replaced with the updated version, and the drive shafts rebuilt with some more race grade components. That whole shop bill, including some machine time, that rang up to $3,200 or so. Let's see here. We'll turn the page here. I'm skipping several that are over $1,000 there. Oh yeah, the snap ring in the transmission did come back to bite me in 2017. That whole escapade cost me about $5,000 between finding a replacement transmission and then paying Source One Automotive to put it in for me and do some other work. That was less than fun. And then I guess most recently, I changed out the headers to the tune of about $1,000 again. Now, where does that leave us? So again, we have $84,000 for 1 year of ownership, including purchase price, versus, some drum roll probably appropriate here, a total of $58,322, about even, for the NSX's costs for 11 years. Some math of interest that slipped my mind while talking to the camera. Running cost-wise, if you don't count purchase price, tax, or fuel, it works out to, obviously with a Gallardo, about $3,750 for my first year. And, entertainingly, about $3,730 was the annual average for the NSX. Obviously, with the NSX, the actual annual expenses have ebbed and flowed over the years, but I found it very interesting that the figure was so close between the two. No, it did not quite catch up to the Gallardo. And really, $58,000 is about what you would pay right now for, I mean, if you've been watching Car Trek, a flood Gallardo, or a pretty mint early generation NSX. You could get a pretty nice one, NA1 probably, so the pre-1997 cars. $60,000 will get you a pretty nice car. It probably needs nothing at that point. And, what this doesn't factor in, though, is the thing that no car enthusiast or car collector, well, not most car collectors, we'll call them amateur level car collectors like me, ever like to talk about, and that is the opportunity cost. I've done the math that instead of buying an NSX in 2008, if I had instead dumped all of that $16,000 into, say, Microsoft stock, I could probably have afforded to bought a new one cash last year if I'd wanted to. I'll stop myself here to make sure I emphasize that there is no amount of money for which I would trade the experiences, learnings, and friendships that these cars have facilitated over the year or years respectively. I think someone else has a near copyright on smiles per gallon as a wordplay, but along the same lines, I consider owning these cars investments in adventure, in the way that they are both literally and figuratively vehicles for my family and I to explore our world. But we won't talk any more about that. Anyway, I'll be curious what you think of this, if this was a surprise to you, or if you'd like to know more about what I've done to the NSX over the years. I can do more on that as well. The Gallardo has been enjoyable so far, and again, as I said, the comparison video is probably upcoming. But for today, I think that's where we're going to leave it. 11 years owning and really enjoying an Acura NSX, 58 grand. Buying a cheap Lamborghini, 84 grand. What would you do? Comment below. In the meantime, and until next time, I'm Richard, this is Lap of the World, and I will see you in the next video, if not, hopefully at the track, once there's no longer a need for quarantine.